Our top 10s of the 2010s.
Our top 10 movies in a variety of categories, mostly related to the things we talk about. So, of course, those categories will be top 10 comic book movies. Now, when I say comic book, I specifically mean superheroes, so I don't mean things like, let's say Edge of Tomorrow. That's based on a graphic novel. Alita Battle Angel is, 300 is.
See, that I actually didn't know.
Yeah, those are all based on either manga or graphic novels.
Well, yeah, Alita and 300 are obvious, but Edge of Tomorrow I didn't know.
But I'm not including those as superhero movies.
I feel like Edge of Tomorrow could be included as both sci-fi or action. Speaking of which, science fiction and action are our other two categories.
Correct.
So let's dive into this, because I had quite a time building these lists together. Do you want to go first, or?
What do we want to start with? Which category?
Well, let's go with superhero films since we introduced it first.
I guess I can start then. I will start with number 10. Deadpool / Deadpool 2. Now, the reason I do that is because I think they were both equally good. When I saw them, I didn't think one was really better than the other. I think if you like the second one, or if you like the first one, you like the second one just as much. And it's a different enough movie from the whole pack, and that's something I think you'll kind of see with my list. I try to get a variety of different types.
Yeah, that's how I tried to build mine. Yeah, throughout this.
So yeah. I thought it stood alone enough to the point where it could be on the list, and yeah, so it makes the spot number 10, Deadpool or Deadpool 2.
Number 10 for me is Aquaman, partially because I needed to include a DC film on this list just to make it legitimate, partially because I think it is the best DC Extended Universe film to date. I know there's some controversy about that, obviously. Like, there's a lot of people who defend BVS, there's a lot of people who defend Shazam. For me, Aquaman is just an incredibly underrated film. Jason Momoa is fantastic in the role. The plot really plays like this whole sort of Shakespearean drama. And it's just a really well-made movie that no one really talks about.
Yeah, I figured it would be on your list because I remember you saying that it was like your favorite DC movie.
Yep.
I can roll with that. Number 9. XMen, Days of Future Past. I think that could definitively be the best of the mainline X-Men movies.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that.
Just because of the way it unites the two casts. I think that's what I like most about it, is the way it crosses over the generations. And you have a lot of cool scenes, of course.
Yeah, obviously the whole Quicksilver scene is still like one of the best scenes from the entire X-Men canon.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, for real.
And one thing I really liked was when Magneto uses the metal from the train to weave through the Sentinels and then control them. I thought that was a really creative way of showing his power. Okay,
my number 9 is Kick-Ass. One that you really don't think about too much since we tend to focus a lot on Marvel and DC. I actually don't know who the publisher is for Kick-Ass. I think it's like Dark Horse or... I might be completely far off on that, but first of all, I think Matthew Vaughn, incredibly talented director. This was really one of his first breakout movies. I think he had like one other movie before Kick-Ass, but it sort of plays with the idea of heroes existing in real life that was sort of made famous with Watchmen, but Watchmen obviously came out in 2007, I think it was, so it could have made it on my list. But yeah, I mean, you have this sort of hyper-violent version of real-life superheroes. It's funny, it's fun, it's just one of these entertaining movies.
You're going to get a kick out of this. According to Wikipedia, the original Kick-Ass novel was published by Marvel.
It was. Okay. Yeah. Well, I still don't really think of it as a Marvel movie by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, no. Obviously, Marvel Studios wasn't behind it.
I mean, would you consider The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen a DC movie?
And I'd consider. I think that's Vertigo. Actually, I mean, obviously
Vertigo
it's an
owned by
Alan Moore
DC.
property. Yeah. Okay, so it's sort of reaching to call it DC. It's like calling V for Vendetta a DC movie.
Sure. Yeah.
Which Watchmen, I think you could make that claim a little more now, just because of both the TV series and not even the TV series. Doomsday Clock obviously connects it to the main DC continuity. Whatever.
Yeah. Remember 2 years ago when we were talking about Doomsday Clock and it just finished its last issue?
I finished it. Last issue was fantastic. The whole run was fantastic. It just shouldn't have taken 2 fucking years to come out.
Yeah, seriously. I've been waiting for the collected edition.
Yeah.
So hopefully that comes out soon.
Okay, number 8.
All right, number 8. Captain America, the first Avenger.
Okay, so I will say I was torn. I wanted to put that on my list. I wanted to put that closer to the bottom. It just did not find its way on here. And I think it's actually the best Cap movie. It's actually very I can definitely see why you included it on the list.
And I do kind of like it better than Winter Soldier because it just fits the tone more for me. Like, I know Winter Soldier is the whole modern spy kind of thing, but First Avenger is like, I don't know, it's classic to me. It has that whole build-up of him, as the little guy becoming the strong guy, and you see when they're using him essentially as just like an advertisement for the military, when he's on stage.
Yeah, that's like period accurate too. Like you look at just so many entertainers from that period were basically propaganda artists. Like Dr. Seuss was famous for making political cartoons about like Hitler just being this super evil dude, and probably don't need to explain what a propaganda artist did in that time period. But that's very period specific.
And I also liked the whole theme song that went along with that. The Who's Strong and Brave, here to save the American way. That and the end theme by Alan Silvestri, I think I'm going to say. The orchestral thing.
All right, sure.
Pretty memorable.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can definitely see why you put it on there. Okay, so my number 8, and I feel like this is probably going to be higher on your list. I feel like this is going to piss off people for it not being higher on my list, but Avengers Endgame is my number 8. And I feel like I don't need to explain why it's on the list. You have this massive culmination of the entire franchise. The reason it's not higher on my list is because as an individual film, first of all, it doesn't really work as an individual film. If you've never seen any other MCU film, you're not going to get this. It's just, it's made for the fans, which some people see as a positive. I see as sort of counterproductive to the whole genre.
I will say this. It is on my list, but I included it in the same number as Endgame because, to me, those are parts 1 and 2. Because if you remember a while ago...
Oh, you mean Infinity War, yeah.
Yeah, Infinity War. Because, before those movies got their official titles, they were just called Infinity Wars Part 1 and 2. And obviously they were filmed back to back. So to me, they're all part of one movie.
Okay, fair enough.
Number 7.
Shazam! Why do I like Shazam? Because I couldn't find a single reason to frown throughout the whole thing. I liked the trailer going into it. I liked the whole movie. And I especially liked the ending of, spoilers if you haven't seen it. It came out back in April, I think. So you're late to that one. How he brings in his whole family as all the Shazam kids. I did not expect that.
Yeah, it was a nice twist.
But it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so I do enjoy Shazam. I love the humor of it, but for me, it doesn't really stand out. It's going to be something that, given a couple years, I'm probably not going to remember it all too well. It's just not, it didn't really leave a profound impact on me. Of course, it's something I enjoy. Zach Levi gave a surprisingly good performance, but, at the same time, it really didn't do anything new with the genre. So for me to narrow down my films to the top 10 and to include something that's sort of comical, it isn't that high up on my list.
What I thought it did is it kind of was like a PG Deadpool, right? Because Deadpool was a whole kind of mocking style of the genre, but it was rated R, and I thought Shazam was also kind of mocking the genre, but, it was more kid with it, even though there's these scary demon things in it that eat people.
No, there's some, straight up horror movie vibes in both that and Aquaman.
Yeah.
And that tends to happen when you have horror directors directing these mainstream movies. They try to inject a little bit of their style to it. Yeah, so what's my number 7? My number 7 is Days of Future Past, which we already talked about, so I'm not going to really lean into it too much. I think people can see why it's on my list. I think people can see why it's at this point on my list. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say other than what we said before, so let's move on to number 6.
Number 6.
Thor Ragnarok. My favorite of all the Thor movies. I don't just like it for the humor. I like it for the whole aesthetic of it, of how it's, essentially the Gladiator Planet movie. Everything comic book sci-fi eventually has a Gladiator Planet episode, right? We have Planet Hulk, the Ninja Turtles go into the Battle Nexus. There's always going to be something like that. And it's not tiring to me yet, and I thought they did, of course, did it well.
Yeah, I mean, Taika Waititi was fantastic, like, throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, and the whole dynamic duo thing that Thor and Hulk had going on, it worked for me.
Yeah. I will say, I think it's the kind of thing that even after you get past the humor of it all, it does work well as a dramatic feature. And, it does sort of reinvent the character, too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you really don't see this comical side of Thor all too much.
Yeah, my favorite scene of that is when he's talking to Odin in whatever that afterlife vision is, and he says, "What are you, the god of hammers? What are you, the god of?" And then you hear like the thunder, and he awakens, and he summons the lightning. Dun 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 dun. Yeah, it's got to be on the list just for that.
Yeah, no, it's got some really cool scenes for sure. So my number 6 is Spider-Man: Homecoming, which I feel like you're probably going to disagree with.
Well, I still haven't seen it, but I expected it to be on your list.
Yeah, you should see it. So first of all, I do sort of go back between this and Far From Home. Far From Home, for what it's worth, is not on the list, despite the fact that it is sort of on par with Spider-Man: Homecoming for me. I feel like it would be overkill to include both of them, and that's also why Into the Spider-Verse is not on the list. So the reason Homecoming is on the list, well, first of all, I think Tom Holland's just the best casting of Peter Parker we've ever seen. And I know that's controversial to anyone who did grow up with the Raimi trilogy. Obviously, I love Tobey Maguire in the role too. But, for me, Tom Holland is the best Spider-Man. When I think of Peter Parker, that's it. So obviously, you have this sort of MCU-centric Spider-Man. So to balance both the themes of the MCU, to balance the overall arc of the MCU with this version of Spider-Man is hard to do. They pretty much nailed it. And even seeing Iron Man as a mentor figure for Peter is just something that I thought a lot of fans resonated with. And that being said, Michael Keaton, to that point, was one of the best villains in the MCU as the Vulture. He was fantastic. That's pretty much all I have to say in a nutshell. I don't want to spoil too much for anyone who hasn't seen it, for you, since you haven't seen it.
Yeah, well, I pretty much know everything that happens anyway at this point, which I should, because it's been out for years.
Yeah, but just a very good movie, and obviously I love Spider-Man. He was my favorite superhero growing up. Of course, I'm going to pick a Spider-Man movie as being somewhere on this list.
All right. Number 5, Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay,
so I will stop you right there. That's also my number 5.
Great. We agree. I don't know if I even need to say much about this one, because it's like, what's not to like?
No, I think James Gunn is remembered as being one of the best directors in the MCU. Obviously, everyone's psyched for Guardians Volume 3. There was the whole campaign to get him back in after he was fired unjustly. But Guardians is just one of these rare movies that is just so much fun that everyone loves. That really, it's... How many movies can you name where you just didn't know any of the characters going in, and they just resonated with you so purely that you loved all of these characters that really you could go back and watch this movie endlessly?
Yeah, and I had no idea who they were, really. All I knew from them was Rocket Raccoon was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and I remember seeing that, they're including some little raccoon thing. I'm like, what the hell is this? Why would they do this? What is this? I don't like this thing. Get it away, no. But then I watched the movie, and it's like, okay, now I like it.
Plus, it's, the first time we actually see Thanos do anything in the slightest. Obviously he has the sort of brief moment in Avengers, but this is the first time he actually interacts, and he's got the Josh Brolin voice. So very cool.
He actually talks. And you see him in the chair, the big, mean, bad guy chair that all big, mean, bad guys sit in until it's time for the plan to be enacted.
Okay, so what's your number 4?
Number 4, Logan. Now, Logan, I think, is definitely the strongest, most emotional Wolverine solo film, and probably X-Men film, and I think that's for me, it's the true end to the X-Men film series, the Fox series.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that.
Because it closes off on such an apt note with that whole tilting the cross into an X, and the fact that he essentially sacrifices himself for what is presumably the next generation of mutants.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah.
So my number 4 is Joker, which, we did an entire podcast on. I don't think I need to really elaborate beyond the fact that, Joaquin Phoenix gave an incredible performance in the character. He's probably going to win an Oscar for it. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Joker, first of all, see it. There's not really too much I can say, since it is, only a month old. I don't want to spoil anything. And it's sort of hard to spoil anyway, since it's just this sort of Scorsese-esque sort of mindfuck. Go see Joker, okay? Go see Joker.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with that. And I'll also have to say that it is my number 3.
Okay.
So nothing need be said on that.
Yeah, I mean, do you need to elaborate? Listen to our podcast on it. It's like number 51, I think. So go back a few. Yeah.
So what's your number 3?
My number 3 is Deadpool, which was your number 10. So the reason I put it this high on the list is because I've probably seen it more than every movie on this list. I've seen Deadpool at least 20 times. And it's one of these movies that I just never get tired of, even if you can't get past the humor of it. First of all, it's very much in line with my sort of sense of humor, as just being the sort of a sophomore crass. It's like, first of all, Ryan Reynolds is one of the best castings we've ever seen in a role like this.
Yeah.
And it's just one of these movies that is endlessly rewatchable, that is just so much fun, that even if it's not like a perfect movie, it's something that I'll keep going back to and I'll never get sick of.
Well said. All right, we are up to the penultimate of the superhero films. Number 2, Man of Steel.
Okay.
Now, I think I've talked about Man of Steel in the past, but I think it was the long past, so I will just briefly explain. This movie, for me, did the whole modern Superman thing right, I think, because if you look at the Christopher Reeve movies, that was everyone in the world of Superman. It was everything kind of built around him as a character, whereas I feel like this movie was more Superman thrown into our world. It's obviously a cynical world. It's not that fun. There's a lot of doubt that goes into it. You know, it's dangerous if you make the wrong choices, and sometimes there are big consequences morally to making certain choices. You know, the whole killing Zod, the whole do I destroy my old worlds to save this one, which is my new world. All the introduced themes I thought were done in a nice way, and obviously it didn't just have the involvement of Zack Snyder. You also had the involvement of Christopher Nolan. I'm pretty sure he had some influence on it.
Jonathan Nolan wrote and co-wrote the script.
Yeah, but if you look, Christopher Nolan's production company is listed on it, and I know he was consulted because, you know, the whole thing, the whole reason why it was made with that tone.
It's inspired by Batman Begins, yeah.
Yeah, and some people complain about all the destruction and the noise in the end, you know, of the end fight between him and Zod, but I wanted to see that. I wanted to see the full potential of that kind of level of power hero and villain going at it. So for me, that was all good. Love his suit. Love Henry Cavill. I don't care about Amy Adams. I know you hate her, but I don't.
I think she's the worst casting in the DC Extended Universe to date.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I shouldn't have to elaborate on that.
I don't know if there's much else to say. I thought it was a good Superman movie, and it inspires me a little bit.
So my number 2 is Logan, which we talked about earlier. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why it's this high on my list. It is the closing of the X-Men franchise. Hugh Jackman is, again, one of these just iconic characters that they're never going to recast Wolverine without it getting a ton of complaints.
You know, I've heard rumors that he's in talks to reprise the role in the MCU now.
I could see that. I think he had said something about like wanting to play the role again if they ever made of course that was a huge hypothetical because at the time no one actually foresaw Disney buying out Fox. Also happened this previous decade. Just saying, we're keeping it all in canon.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm skeptical if he's actually going to do it. It would be fun to see, but there's also no X-Men movies on the docket anytime soon. Deadpool 3 actually has been announced, which...
New Mutants still going to come out, guys, right?
Yeah, it might happen. It could happen.
Jeez.
I think they... I forget who the director is. Josh Trank, I think is the guy, right?
No, definitely
No, that's the
not.
Fantastic Four guy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I keep forgetting who the guy... Whatever. Someone from the production staff had apparently said that another trailer is going to come out early in January, which I'm skeptical of.
They still haven't done the reshoots, though. They're supposed to do reshoots, and they haven't.
We'll see. I don't think that's going to happen.
Josh Boone is the director.
So it is a Josh. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on to our number 1 choices.
The number 1 superhero film of the 2010s on my list is
Avengers Infinity War / Endgame.
Okay, so I see what you did. Well, Avengers Infinity War is my number one. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why. I thought you put Avengers Endgame lower on the list, actually. I know I did, but...
No, I just mentioned earlier that I had put it in the same number with Infinity War.
Okay, well, I can see why you put it that high on the list. Obviously, yeah. Avengers Infinity War is my number one. Thanos, really the most incredible villain, not just in the MCU, but like one of the most incredible villains on film of all time.
It's a CGI bad guy done right. Looking at you, Justice League.
Yeah, no, it's just a movie that flows perfectly. The pacing is on point, which is a rarity for a like major Hollywood blockbuster movie. And that's actually another gripe I had with Rise of Skywalker that I forgot to mention. Just the pacing at the beginning was terrible. Yeah, I mean, what else can we really say about Avengers Infinity War? Like, this is one of these movies that just everyone was sort of blown away by. The whole twist of him actually getting away with it. Like, how often does the villain actually win?
Mm-hmm.
It was freaking incredible.
The biggest thing I think that Infinity War and Endgame get right is splitting up the cast to tell, like, these smaller stories individually and keep cycling back around to them, and they all come into play. And they all coalesce in the end. And, of course, you see everybody, like the whole cast of every movie, come in at the end of Endgame. And, you know, we did a whole podcast on that, too, a whole review. So you can get full thoughts if you go listen to that one. I think it was, 47 or something?
Yeah, something like that. I will say, very satisfying battle, but the cinematography could have been better.
Okay. I actually saw behind the scenes about how they did it, and it's crazy how they factor in all this green screening and effects. Like, they actually have people run towards each other, but they're running in at different times. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a $300 million achievement. So yeah, the one thing that I think, like I said, it does the whole splitting up of the plot and the cast really well, which I felt like Crisis on Infinite Earths could have did a little bit better, but that's TV.
Well, I feel like Crisis doesn't have as many characters, speaking of which we just did a podcast on this, go listen. But yeah, I mean, I think when people saw the first trailer for Infinity War, and when people were first hearing that Infinity War would include this massive cast, the sort of fear was that it would be sort of over-encumbered, no character would really have enough screen time, that all of these characters would sort of overlap each other and would just be a jumbled mess. It was not that. It worked incredibly well. They actually managed to make all of these characters feel as important as they ever were. Obviously, Thanos had the most screen time of any character by far, and it really does feel like Thanos' story in Infinity War. Endgame is obviously a little more focused on the actual Avengers cast, but... And that's actually something that bugs me about Endgame that is a reason why it's lower on my list, is that Thanos, they sort of gave a more neutered portrayal. He's sort of a weaker character in that his plans just sort of turn from actually trying to do something for the common good to essentially trying to destroy the universe. That
well, to me, the whole killing half made no sense at all, and it actually made more sense to me to just get rid of everything and just redo it.
Well, see, in that instance, I can understand the philosophy. It's a utilitarian good. He's trying to save the universe by killing half the universe, by making resources more readily available for the remaining half. And by showing that he has this kind of power, it gives people the threat to, not overpopulate and actually manage the resources well.
But you could poke such a huge flaw in that with one thing and say, why didn't he just double the resources? Why didn't he just give everyone a well that generates infinite resources?
He could have pretty easily, and I think part of that goes down to Thanos' character of being this power-obsessed madman. He is the Mad Titan, you have to keep in mind.
Yeah, he wanted to be worshipped, which is why...
Exactly, he wants to be well-known.
Yeah, so why wouldn't he want to make a new universe? I was like, of course.
Okay, because if he becomes the god of this new universe, eventually there's going to be disbelievers, there's going to be non-believers. Everyone's going to remember the guy who decimates half of all humanity, and the guy who commits mass genocide on a universal scale.
Well, you figure if he's programming a new universe, he could program everyone to just be drones.
Yeah, but that would be boring, wouldn't it?
Of course, which is why his plan is stupid.
Yeah, well, again, that's why it bugs me in Endgame. I'm glad we're on the same page for this.
Yeah.